Sneakers and Cleats, the podcast.
Welcome back to the Sneakers and Cleats podcast. It's Thursday, June 27th. I would say we're back and better than ever, but honestly, I'm not quite sure. It's episode 113. Remember to rate, review, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating. I am your host, Matt Roy, along with Zach Hedrick. I almost said Zach Migatinic and Chuck Migatinic.
That's all right. Two heads are better than one.
We switched seats, and then we had the supers right at least. So at least everything on that end is correct. Don Harris not here today because he's on his way back from Brooklyn. Did a great job covering the draft for everybody there. That's what we're going to talk about a lot today. Stephon Castle, the newest Spur. Rob Dillingham, the newest traded Spur, I guess. Does he count as a Spur if he was here?
For all of 30 seconds.
Got a cup of coffee.
That's actually like got a cup of coffee in the NBA, got a cup of coffee in the Spur. So we'll get to both of those moves plus round two starting up here in about an hour and a half. So we'll get a little bit of that in, but it'll be dated by the time this airs. So we won't get too much into it. Plus Bronny James, a future Spur, maybe? I don't know.
Why not?
And then the sleaziest move of all sleazy moves, going to get into Mr. Jim Schlossnagle leaving the Aggies to head to Texas as the new coach of Longhorn baseball. I know Chuck's got a whole lot to say about it. It was something that we don't talk a lot of college baseball on this program, but you got to talk about that one. So a lot there. But first, as we usually let's get to the number game. 113, guys, 113 episodes. First of all, that's kind of amazing that we've lasted this long. But 13, Wilt Chamberlain is 13 for me.
I can't think of anybody better.
That works for me as well.
I mean, for someone who owns the number.
Yeah.
I was told a long time ago by the great Mike Easler that you show me a guy that wears the number 13, and that's the guy you should go do a story on. Because if you're willing to wear the number 13 as superstitious as most dudes are, you look at that list, it's a pretty eclectic list.
It's a pretty good list. I mean, Wilt Chamberlain's
Beckham,
obviously
A-Rod, James Harden.
The one that I thought of immediately was Dan Marino. I thought of him, and then I was like, oh, wait, it should be Wilt. Wilt's number is 13, and he's obviously the greatest, 13. But Dan Marino is probably the greatest player to ever not win a Super Bowl, even though his career started so swimmingly and getting to the Super Bowl in his second year and then just never got back. But I know, Chuck, you are a Packer fan. Aaron Rodgers has been dubbed as the most talented quarterback of all time. Dan Marino was the one that was more talented before that. Do you think that Dan Marino is the most talented quarterback of all time, or is it more Aaron Rodgers?
Hard to weigh. I mean, God, Marino was awfully good. Rodgers is awfully good too. And I mean, if you're just going to say this, the caveat is that Aaron Rodgers won one more Super Bowl than Dan Marino did. But I thought you were going to go the route of, Chuck, can you name of a Packer that wore the number 13? And I can. Chester Markle, the kicker.
I was going to.
Deep cut.
Sorry,
deep into the
spinning
bag for Chester Markle
wildly off the rails.
Also, Steve Nash, James Harden, Paul George, PG-13, also a good one. Odell Beckham Jr., Kurt Warner, and A-Rod also wearing 13. So that's pretty good little list there. Cheater. But the problem with A-Rod is that he was a Hall of Fame player before he started cheating, just like Barry Bonds was. And it's just so aggravating that he ended up cheating because now he has.
So he gave in to peer pressure.
He did.
You know what his nickname was when he was playing amongst other players? A-Fraud.
Oh, God. If
the shoe fits.
I don't like A-Rod because I'm a Red Sox guy. So
Wait, what did he do to cheat?
Took steroids.
Oh, it was okay.
I mean, he was caught up in all that thing.
Okay.
Plus, I mean, anytime you go to the Yankees too, I mean, and
that whole time, that for me too.
That whole time, it's like the Rangers are paying his salary to play in pinstripes,
except for Nick Swisher.
Yeah,
always gets a pass.
Yeah,
they only won one World Series with A-Rod there. Wasn't the book on those Yankees that they couldn't get through in the postseason because A-Rod came up short every postseason after that.
And he was really, really good on that Yankees championship run.
Yeah. In 2009, he was really good, but the years before that, he did not do very well.
That's correct. But when he needed to step up most for the Yankees, and if he doesn't play like he did, they probably don't win that series.
It's fair.
Squirrel moment. I'm thinking of that clip from the other guys, when the policemen are in the group therapy session. You should have shot A-Rod.
I saw you busting and laughing. I was wondering what that was. That makes sense. Zach Pop. Such a good movie. Also in 2013, getting back on the rails, the Ravens beat the 49ers in the Harbaugh Bowl. The lights turned off in that second half, turned the whole game around for the Ravens. Joe Flacco, the Super Bowl MVP. That was the peak elite Joe Flacco talk.
Hey, first touch of the game belonged to our very own Priest Holmes.
Oh, did it?
Yep.
Didn't know that. Red Sox defeated the Cardinals. So go Sox. David Ortiz, the MVP. And the Heat defeated the Spurs. Sad face for all Spurs fans.
Got revenge the next year.
Yes, they did. We'll talk about that Monday. Heat defeated the Spurs 4-3. LeBron James was the MVP of that series, obviously well known for the Ray Allen shot. The Chris Bosh rebound. Ray Allen, bang! To send that sixth game into overtime. So let's get to the Spurs draft. So first round, come and gone. Spurs made a couple of predictable moves and a couple of not so predictable moves, I guess, depending on who you are. I'm just going to say that I think most of us had it right. Stephon Castle going number 4. I know Don predicted that. I think I said that on Monday that Castle would go number 4 as well. It was like too much smoke for there not to be fire, I guess, when it comes to Stephon Castle. So they also traded their 8th pick. That ended up being Rob Dillingham. We'll get to that in a second. But first, Castle, let's hear from Brian Wright first before we get into it. This is him last night after the first round.
It wasn't like this was the first time we'd heard of him. We'd seen him in the high school scene. He was a pretty highly rated high school player. And so we tried to spend as much time with those guys as possible and get to know them. So spending time at practice, going to games, even in the grassroots scene when we're allowed to see those guys, we try to make sure that we get eyes on them. So he'd been somebody that we knew a lot about. And when the opportunity was there for, we were really excited to draft him. So he's very versatile. He's tough. He's smart. Most times you don't see highly rated players go to a school and be willing to play a role, right? He played on the ball and off the ball in high school and, was doing things that he just wasn't able to showcase sometimes at UConn because they were so good and they were deep and they were experienced. And so that ability to sacrifice for the betterment of the team is something that stood out to us as well, right? Because that's something you're going to have to do across the course of your career, everybody. And so that stood out as a great quality, but he's tough, he's smart, he's a team-first guy, he's a hard worker, and he comes from a program where they're getting coached hard every single day. They work hard, they practice hard, they're competitive, and they execute, and that meant a lot to us.
Guys, initial thoughts on Stephon Castle when he was announced last night?
Just home run pick. I mean, of course, everything had to fall just right, and it did, to where that the Spurs got to take their guy. I mean, could you ask for a better fit? I mean, this is going to be, I think, like a hand fitting inside a glove for this pick, and everything that Wright said, just his versatility, but also kind of the team first nature. I mean, talk about, a winning culture going right to another winning culture.
Yeah. Take where he's from and, how many good ball players come out of the region of New York, and then 6'6" with a 6'9" wingspan. It's going to fit in nicely against a certain big fellow that plays in the middle too.
Yeah.
So, and defensive minded too. I mean, all those things, checks every one of the boxes that the Spurs usually look for.
There's a reason that he was linked to the Spurs for so long. Like every mock draft you saw, it was Stephon Castle at 4 or Stephon Castle at 8. I mean, he has the body type and he has the mindset that the Spurs look for. He's very Spursian in that sense. He's a defensive guy. He's a really good rebounder, and his offense kind of comes second. But he also didn't get to showcase a lot of that offense at UConn because their team was so damn good. They have Donovan Clingan and all the other guys that are on that UConn team that repeated as national championships for a reason.
Underrated passer too.
Yeah, and it's going to be kind of interesting to see how he fits into a point guard role, if that is where they see him as. I mean, maybe he's going to be more off the ball, and this is all going to go through Victor. You don't really know how they're going to play that point guard role and how necessary that's going to be with Victor on the team. But I think he kind of fits the mold of what they're looking to do.
Absolutely, yeah. I think you hit it right there on the head. I mean, and he wants to play point guard. He played I believe the 2 at UConn, so he's got that off-ball skill set, ready to go as well. But, it's going to be interesting to see these first 15, 20 games as compared to last year. You have somebody who actually wants to play the position. And then, let's see where the chips fall as, this relationship starts to develop. I mean, the hardwood from the 3-point line to the cup is going to be well traveled, I think.
No idea what you're talking about with Jeremy Sohan playing point guard.
Yeah.
I don't know. I try and forget the first 25 games of the season. It's the worst. Let's hear from Castle real quick. This is him at the podium after he got drafted, saying that the Spurs have been linked to him for a little while.
I just can't wait to get out there and show my versatility, especially with, the kind of talent that, we already have on that team, it being the youngest team in the league right now. So I feel like our future is pretty bright, and, I just can't wait to get out there. Yeah. I mean, I was just playing for the best coach in college basketball. So now going to flip to the NBA and playing for, a legendary coach like Coach Pop, I mean, it's definitely a blessing. And, on the culture side of things, I mean, it's not really a big culture change from UConn to San Antonio. I mean, just being out there during, the pre-draft process, you can tell that, it's a hard-working program and, super hard-nosed. So, I just can't wait to go out there and, just show what I got.
He's going to get the chance to. I don't think there's too much of a clutter in front of him. Obviously, Vassell is going to be in the starting lineup. He's the highest-paid player on the team. With the rest of the lineup, though, especially in the 1 through 3 positions, you don't really know where everyone's going to play out. Is he going to play more of a? He can play more of a 3. He has the size to play a 3, to guard 1 through 3. He can definitely beat out Julian Champagnie for that small forward spot, I guess, for that 3 position and in positionless basketball. He can even play the 1 if he wants to be Castle at 1, Vassell at 2, Champagnie at 3. So you have a lot of versatility with him as well, especially when it comes to defensively.
Yeah, I think, with Wemby in the middle, this gives them an opportunity to try to build a roster where you can play inside out a heck of a lot more. And again, with these players nowadays, they're all so versatile, doing so many things. And you run these motion offenses, everybody's got to be a facilitator at some point. So, again, you're talking about measurables. This guy's got them. And the mental makeup seems like it goes right along with what the Spurs are looking for. So, again, it's hard to imagine that you could miss with this high of a pick. So, I mean, again, I think they got a heck of an addition, and it sure seems like they have.
Danny Hurley, the same thing. Something that they tweeted out was that one of the knocks on Castle is that he doesn't have a great outside shot. That his percentage was really low. He didn't make a lot of them.
He shot, I think, 47% last year. That's not bad.
That's 27%.
No, I thought it was 47
from 3.
Okay,
from 3, he shot 27%.
I got you.
So Brian Wright addressed that last night, saying he just didn't get his chance to shoot his way out of a slump. Sometimes he only got 5 to 7 shots a game because that team was so deep. And then Danny Hurley last night said he just played the role that we gave him. Sometimes he would take the shots, but a lot of times he passed it to the open guy because they had such an efficient offense. But when it comes to his mechanics, Danny Hurley was like, he has the perfect mechanics to be a good shooter. He just needed the volume, and we couldn't give him the volume because our team was so deep. So, I mean,
that makes sense. It's like when you watch Victor Wembanyama shoot a basketball, like everything is smooth, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you would think at some point he's going to be a heck of a shooter just based on the mechanics. To me, look pretty sound. He's not jerky. He's super smooth, and everything flows when the ball leaves his hand. So, again, these are young players that can be taught, and they're not done growing as human beings or as athletes.
Yeah, you get one-on-one time with NBA coaching. I mean, if there are any kinks, they're going to get smoothed out real quick when your job is just to shoot baskets all day long and work with professional coaches and professional teammates. I mean, so it's going to be real fun to watch Castle's development along with the rest of this young core. So should be a fun training camp once they get going here in a couple months.
So going into last night, the Spurs had 2 picks. Their second pick ended up being Rob Dillingham, but they traded him away. Like as soon as they announced it, the trade rumors started flying, and then it was announced about 10 picks later by Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner. So it's Rob Dillingham, the Kentucky guard, for a 2030 pick swap and a 2031 unprotected first-round pick from Minnesota. Now that sounds really far, and that's because it is really
especially
far.
at my age.
Yeah.
Yes.
At least half the people in this room are going to be retired at that point.
I mean, again, I was spitballing this last night on the air because the first round was still going on. I mean, essentially, did the Spurs just say there weren't 8 good players in this draft?
So I was in the media room last night, and that was what a lot of the media was kicking around. After I asked Brian what he thought of the talent in the first round. He said it's a deep draft. He said there's not a lot of top end talent, but there's a lot of good players throughout the first round. But I think their actions told us the complete opposite. One, by trading 8, And 2, by seeing the return that Minnesota gave them for 8. This is a top 10 pick. It should be worth more than one first rounder and one unprotected or one unprotected first rounder and a pick swap. That's 7 years down the road. But instead, you're getting 2 picks that are way, way down the road. And
I got a 12-year-old.
Yeah, basically. You just drafted for an 11 or 12-year-old.
11-year-olds. Yeah.
So I think that told you a lot. Their actions said, we don't think that this draft's very good. So why would we hold on to this pick when we can get ammo down the road?
Yeah, and I think it leads to a broader question now, too, is now don't they have to do something very proactive in free agency? Because I think most of us thought that there would be quality in the top 8 picks. And I'm pretty sure that there are other teams that think there was some quality in there, right? But now, don't you have to now go out and maybe sign a free agent to help build this roster? Because if Castle's the only guy that you've added to last year's team,
then it's a failed offseason. I think that's fair. Zach, what do you think?
Yeah, well, they're sticking with the plan of, hey, this yes, we want to show improvement and win more games than we did the past 2 years, more than 22. I think they'll do that, but they're sticking with that plan. And you heard Brian touch on that. It's like we're looking at a long term to where it's like we're not just going to be good for 2 or 3 years. This is a 6, 7, 8 year plan where, yeah, we're going to be solid for that length of time. Couple that, yes, we had the same reaction. It's just that's so far away. 2030, 31. Wow. But when you couple that with
I hope I'm here.
You will be.
Ain't no guarantees, man.
When you have the treasure trove that they have of all the other picks, I mean, you got to imagine that, yeah, there's going to be, and everybody kind of read that through the tea leaves right away. There's going to be something happening. Maybe today even, who knows? They've got 2 picks in the second round. Who's to say they're dealing that second round pick today or something with something else just to build up more picks to where then they're sitting back and saying, okay, we're open for business. What other teams are going to come and say, all right, we can offer you this for picks?
I think it also, a broader point too, if I may, just a second. Everybody in that front office must have really good job security. If they can start, planning this thing 7 years out like that, nobody's under any pressure. It wouldn't feel like to me, based on what I saw last night, to get this thing done right effing now.
Yeah, Bob?
Can I ask you, because social media last night was like, people were not happy about this deal of this, pick in 2097,
2031,
whenever it is. But can you guys, is that, what do you think of that? Is that a bad deal?
So I don't know if it's a bad deal just because you're getting an unprotected first round pick. And as good as Minnesota is right now, you don't know how they're going to be in 7 years. They could be dog water in 7 years.
Right.
So it could be, in theory, that could turn into the first pick in the draft in 2031, and the Spurs are already a juggernaut, and then they get a first round pick, and there you go.
I mean, Bob, I think it's hard to understand. It's hard to really know for sure because, again, we don't know what these guys are going to look like next week. We may not know what they look like next year. It may take 3 or 4 years, but it's certainly going to leave open the possibility for very, very high criticism if any of those guys that were taken after that 8th spot turn out to be Michael Jordan or Michael Jordan Jr.
Or if Rob Dillingham turns out to be like that.
Yeah. Well, even better.
There's been a lot of criticism or a lot of talk around Rob Dillingham that he worked out horribly. Guess who also worked out horribly? Tyrese Maxey. So if he turns into something like that, then
Tony Parker did too.
The Spurs are going to look like crap.
So yeah.
But you mentioned Brian Wright's comments last night. He didn't really say anything because they wouldn't allow him to say anything because technically this trade had not gone through yet. Mm-hmm. 45 minutes later, it did, which is convenient. But just for just for gits and shiggles, let's hear from Brian Wright real quick.
Knew you were gonna ask me a question I can't answer.
I'm trying to avoid the word.
Yeah, no, can't speak to specifics. But at a point in time, we'll talk about that. I think the decisions you make over time, around your flexibility, around the adaptability with ways with which you can build, we've been pretty consistent with that, and we will. Like I said, we want to build something that's sustainable. And you got to build it brick by brick. And, we hope to do that. But I think all the decisions that we made to this point have been under that premise.
So I think I think that they're operating in we're going to take this patiently, and I don't give a damn what anyone else thinks. And that's how they should be operating. But in this short attention span, impatient time that we live in, all of us are like, let's freaking go.
Right.
Sure.
I'm with you. I mean, I think, sorry, go ahead.
No. Well, I think just like Coach Pop said it after drafting, we're not skipping steps. And you see that alignment, it's from the top down. Everybody's on the same page, even with the draft. Hey, we're not skipping steps. We're making the methodical moves. So, and they're sticking with it. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, I just don't want to feel like I'm, freaking grabbing the mic here and not letting loose. So, yeah, I just think it's, we've seen this happen year after year after year after year after year with this franchise and how patient they are. And it has served them for the most part pretty well. Now, obviously, we're in totally uncharted territory with this franchise in terms of how it's been in terms of winning games the last few years. But if you don't think that there was somebody good at number 8, then this was probably the best way to go. And I'm, good for them for at least being able to make a decision and, doubling down on what they did.
Bob, you got a couple of comments?
Well, at first I just had one question, then we have a couple comments. Can you guys explain what a pick swap is?
It's exactly what it sounds like. You get the right to swap your pick that year with the other team. So if, let's say, the Timberwolves have the 4th pick and the Spurs have the 10th pick that year, they could swap.
Gotcha. Kevin H says the Spurs are cheap. You can say it. They didn't want to pay for another lottery pick. And then Jay Sanchez says, why are people so damn infatuated with that 8th pick? It wasn't Michael Jordan or Magic Johnson.
But we don't know yet. Probably right. He's probably right based on the Spurs activity last night.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't know. The bottom line is you don't know. This is not an exact science.
Everybody's throwing spaghetti at the wall at this point and seeing what sticks.
I mean, the 8th pick saved them $7 million. And that's the other aspect of this, is that everyone's kind of trying to read the tea leaves here. Okay, saved them $7 million. It saves them a roster spot right now. Free agency hasn't started yet.
Starts on Sunday.
It's like that Brian Windhorst thing. Why would they do that? It's like, who knows? We don't know what they're going to do, but we do know that they're going to do something. We just have no idea when the hell that's going to happen. I think that after that trade last night, it showed you, one, what they thought of that, what they thought of the first round, and what they thought of the talent in this draft, which is that the narrative surrounding it was exactly right. It wasn't great. And 2, it tells me that they have another plan to do something in free agency, because I personally don't think they're going to go into the season next year with the exact same roster they had plus Stephon Castle. That just doesn't make sense to me.
I'm with you.
Why would you run it back?
Yeah.
Right.
I have one more comment. Our intrepid reporter, Tani Davis, sent me her brother's comment. Said, if they traded the 8th pick and it doesn't turn into us getting a star, I better see this fool working cashier at Whataburger. So I just want I think he's talking about Brian Wright, but I don't know. I just felt like getting that in there. Just shout out to Tony's brother. Anything else on the Spurs, guys, before we get to Schloss?
Let's get to Schloss. We might be here an hour for that.
Chuck's been waiting for this. So
the clip is loaded.
The clip is loaded up. Just to paint the picture here. The Texas A&M Aggies, if you haven't been paying attention to the college baseball world, which a lot of people don't, but some people do, the Texas A&M Aggies played in the College World Series final. Their game 3, the final game of the baseball season, was Monday evening. In game 2, Monday afternoon. Baseball. There was rumors starting to fly around that Chris DeConte, the athletic director for Texas, had flown out to Omaha, and he wasn't going to leave without Jim Schlossnagle, who is the Texas A&M Aggies head coach as of Monday. They have connections, obviously. Chris Del Conte and Jim Schlossnagle worked together very closely at TCU, which is where Schloss was for A&M. And Chuck, take it away.
I thought we were going to play a soundbite.
Oh, wait. Okay. All right. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Sorry, I forgot. I just was trying to get to you as fast as possible.
Well, so the Aggies lose Monday, and then after the game, the obvious question gets asked, and then Schloss decides to steal.
what you have to say about your future in Aggie land.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty selfish of you to ask me that question, to be honest with you. But I left my family to be the coach at Texas A&M. I took the job at Texas A&M to never take another job again. And that hasn't changed in my mind. And I've poured every ounce of my soul in this job. And I've given this job every single ounce I can possibly give it. Write that.
Write it, Chuck.
Well, this story is, as it evolves through the last 48 hours, 72 hours, I mean, there's just more and more stuff coming out. And, we're supposed to believe that Jim Schlossnagle was all in on the Texas A&M Aggies until the final pitch of the last out of the national championship game 3. And then out of the blue, Chris Del Conte comes running with a contract. And by at least 8:00 the next morning, that thing was done. So that on the surface is a little hard to believe, especially given Schloss's buyout, given the fact that I'll backtrack a little bit. The Tuesday before the national championship game on Monday, I was in Omaha hanging out, watching College World Series baseball.
Doing jelly
Met a few of the Aggie families, baseball families there. And at least 2 of the dads knew that Pierce was going to get fired at Texas and that Schloss was going to be a candidate. But the general thinking was, well, Schloss is going to use this to maybe get a little bit bigger bag, to, maybe hit the gas on trying to get the stadium
Fast track
expansion.
it, yeah.
But again, since this happened, you have the Aggies lose a national championship game, and the insinuation is that this deal, while it may not have been consummated until Monday morning, it was maybe a done deal before Monday morning. You mean to tell me that none of this just was in the works, that there wasn't a phone call? And Schloss said that there wasn't any conversations, but then sort of walked it back because he and Del Conte are friends, and that they did talk, but they never talked about this kind of stuff. But Matthew, my brain's going to explode over all this stuff. So it's like, even if he had an inkling that he was leaving, how do you then go give the school that you're leaving, which is the arch rival, the same conference now, next year? You're going to leave them with a national championship, then leave the school, then have to play the defending national champs next year in the same conference. I mean, did they get the very best of Jim Schlossnagle in that series when, by all accounts, this started happening long before they even got to Omaha? So how do you even look at the regional, that really close game to Texas that started the whole thing off? I mean, look, I'll just tell you flat out, I've got it on real good authority that not only on Tuesday morning when Schloss was allegedly taking the job, he was trying to poach kids too and get them to go and come with him to Texas. So if that is ever proven to be true or ever vetted, I've called the SEC, haven't gotten a call back. If any of that stuff ever occurred, like I was told that it was, and I mean, you're talking about, you can't be tampering with kids that aren't in the portal yet. And now we've got a bunch of kids in the portal, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to go to Texas with Schloss. I mean, these kids now, the ones that are mostly in there, have to protect themselves because the new baseball coach at A&M is going to come in and probably bring a bunch of new guys with him too. So these kids have to see what's out there now because everybody's future's in doubt over all this. And even if Schloss wasn't the one asking kids to go, there were guys on that staff that did 100% ask those kids to leave and go to Texas with them.
Fire them up, Chuck. Couple of questions for you. Do you think that if this Texas thing wasn't a thing, and I'm not saying that it was on Sunday or Monday or Saturday, that A&M would have won the series, or do you think that this whole thing affected the way that this College World Series played out?
Schloss kind of danced around that, right, yesterday?
Yeah, it's really murky when he and Del Conte started talking. And Schloss during the press conference yesterday said, yes, you already said it. it had no effect on the series or anything like that when our players took the field. He made that point specifically. So it's like, okay, something was known by maybe a group of players, certainly his staff, I would think, knew.
Yeah.
So, when they were in the locker room before going onto the field, yeah, I'm sure it was a topic of conversation amongst some of the players.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know. Again, we don't know. We may never
Right.
know, but
Yeah.
it certainly opens up the avenue for people like us to spitball and ask a legitimate question. Did the Aggies in a national championship ball game get the very, very, very best of its head coach, who they were paying a rather good salary?
And then it all just comes off really, really sleazy. Like I texted you that on Tuesday, and I was just like, it just doesn't pass the smell test. None of it passes the smell test. It's sleazy. It's Benedict Arnold-ish. It's one of those things that just doesn't sit well.
Yeah. I just have a feeling too, if this stuff's going to come out eventually, but there are going to be probably a half dozen of these Aggie kids that are baseball players that are going to go down as absolute legends at this school for basically telling and shooting a middle finger at what was going on. And I mean, again, there are probably more grown men, more professionals on that Aggie baseball roster than there were in terms of the guys that were the quote unquote leaders.
Go for it.
Well, Travis Chestnut, I mean, he's already somebody who's fired off. I mean, he was on the national championship or this World Series final team. It sounds like there was maybe a bit of beef between him and Schlossnagle a little bit, just in the back and forth that those two had. But, he said, yeah, I felt like this guy never did care about me as a player. So there's going to be a lot of that. And he's on record saying that. I mean, so there's going to be a ton of that stuff coming out. We'll see, who comes over and who stays at A&M. I mean, the staff, Schloss bringing over his entire staff.
Yeah.
He made it a point to be like, hey, aside from Del Conte, that was one of the big things. I needed to bring over my staff so we can have this continuity.
Yeah. How much obviously Aggies Twitter, Aggies, the 12th man has been insane over the last couple of days. I can't read pretty much anything that has been tweeted or said on social media over the last few days, just because it's been pretty nasty, for good reason. But how much does the whole Texas little brother, big brother thing play into this as well?
I think a little. I mean, again, you're talking about a team that was this close to winning its first team title since 1939, right? Something like that. I mean, it's been a long time. And it was a damn good ball club that lost its best position player, its number 2 pitcher. They had a couple other guys playing on one leg, and yet here they were in the final game of the final game of the season. Yeah, of course, the rivalry has something to do with it. But if this was McNeese State and Texas State, would anybody have cared? Probably not. But the bottom line is that would have been douchey too. Can I say that on TV?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
This is a podcast.
I just did. I may have to believe it, but I mean,
douchey's good.
Okay, well then let's just take it. The douchebaggery on this one knows no bounds as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it's just not right. I mean, those kids didn't even get to mourn that game and what it did to them to then turn around and have this on top of it. I mean, can you imagine what that plane ride was like back, or that bus ride into College Station? I mean, it's just cruel and unusual punishment. I know a lot of Longhorns that are absolutely embarrassed by how this has all went down. And I get the sense that this is just the beginning of what's to come.
And it's not the first time Schloss has done this. When he was at TCU for 18 years, he was getting overtured by A&M to take that job, and he said, I'm here at TCU. I'm not interested in any other job. But what happens? He goes down to College Station. So he's done this before. He joins kind of the ranks of Brian Kelly going from Notre Dame to LSU, and Lincoln Riley going from OU to USC.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of in the similar vein. You feel bad for the kids because, he could have answered this reporter's question on Monday night a whole lot better. Of just, hey, we just came off the field.
I'm not going to answer that
lost,
right now. Yeah.
We lost a World Series, a shot at a national championship. Our players are hurting right now. Let's focus on
right. That. I mean, you could spitball this till we're blue in the face. It's like, yeah, it's some of this is, yeah, Aggies, don't cry me a river. This has been, you've done this to other schools too when you're poaching coaches and players, coaches. Again, this happens all the time. I just want to know, was this done 100% by the book on all levels, whether players get in the portal and then leave and go someplace else, or was there talk between a rival school and, I mean, again, a rival school playing in its national title game, and to have this all going on by the rival school in the background, I mean, potentially, allegedly, I mean, how do you unpack all that?
Bob, you got a comment?
Yeah, Chuck, Kevin H is asking exactly the next question from what you're saying is, what is the NCAA penalty for that?
I would really have to look it up again. Does anybody get penalized for anything nowadays? I mean, and again,
you hear Jeff Traylor talking about tampering all the time.
Yeah,
was that what you were going to say?
I was just going to bring that up. We hear about this from Jeff Traylor
all the time
during the fall, and nothing happens.
And then so if this is going on, I mean, there are reports that there were burner phones being used to coerce other players at other schools to already start coming to Texas. I mean, the levels of this and what's already out there, I mean, it's mind-boggling. But again, what's the incentive for the SEC to go after essentially two of its schools in its own league?
Yeah.
And then also, if there were rules broken, to take this to a whole nother level, were some of these rules broken while this staff was at A&M?
There's a lot of questions.
There's just nowhere that this thing can go
The
on a level.
The last thing I'll say on this is I just found it endlessly humorous that Chris Del Conte sitting outside of a cemetery for 4 hours yesterday while waiting for Schloss to get back to College Station. I can just imagine him just sitting in his car, just like playing Wordle or something, just trying to pass the time in front of old Aunt Miriam, who's dead in the cemetery.
And again,
now.
if that's your alibi, great, let it be your alibi. But when you're tweeting a picture of it, I mean, like, what the hell is going on here?
He's like, believe me, please.
Yeah. I mean, again, this is going to be a really fun next, I don't know, at least week. I would say every day there's a new little tidbit coming out. So,
well, I hope it lasts till Monday because I need another rant from Chuck on Monday. That's what I'm here for.
I hope I'll be better, at saying nicer things the next time around.
All right. Well, second round is going to begin here in a couple hours. Everybody tune into that, see what the Spurs do. That's all we got for you today on the Sneakers and Cleats podcast. Remember to rate, review, subscribe, tell a friend, tell an enemy, give us a 5-star rating. We'll see you right back here on Monday with all of the conclusion of the draft. We'll debrief with Don Harris as well, since I think, probably going to walk into the building here red-eyed. Is probably a little tired after getting off the plane and coming into work, but we'll see him then. We'll see everyone else then as well. Have a good weekend.